Hi, guys. Welcome to the That's Where I'm At podcast. I'm Laura, and today I have Susan with us. Susan is a 45-year-old widow with 4 adult children and 1 grandson. In her home during the 20 plus years of her marriage, she experienced verbal and emotional abuse as well as physical abuse from time to time. The insecurities in her life left her feeling ugly, worthless, and was convinced she may never be happy again in life. During a rebellious season in her life, she made terrible choices and now can say the Lord has forgiven her and redeemed her. She now leads women in Bible study as she knows her purpose in life is to help married women avoid falling into the same patterns she fell into, which led to a very dark and wicked road leading to eternal separation from God. So, welcome, Susan. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. I know it's not easy to share your story, but I know that your heart is to help women, to, like you said, to not fall into the same
Mhm.
patterns you may have. So, and I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people. So let's just start from the beginning. Let's just start from the beginning of maybe your marriage. What was that like? And let's just tell the story.
Okay. Well, I met my husband at our first job. It was actually both of our first job. Um,
Were you guys
he was
young? Were you guys?
very young. He was 16. I was 17.
Wow.
Um, and actually, we just worked together.
Mhm.
And we just talked one day and we realized that we went to the same school and we didn't even know it. And yeah, like after we had that discussion, I saw him the next day walking down the hallway, like,
Oh, that's
and
so
he's like, I
funny.
walk down this hallway every day. And I was like, what? And we just continued talking. And um, I had never dated before. He had like girlfriends, but nothing serious.
Uh-huh.
But we started dating and we dated while we worked together. And then I graduated, and then we just continued to pursue a relationship.
Mhm.
Um, we were engaged for about a year, and then I got pregnant before we got married.
Mhm.
And I did have a miscarriage. That was really hard. Um, but I think it was what needed to happen, I guess, for us to kind of get our priorities straight.
Okay.
Um,
Right.
but then I got pregnant again about 5 months later,
Wow.
and I was having complications again. And he took me to the hospital because I didn't know if I was going to lose this baby.
Right.
But during the ultrasound, they found out I was having twins. Um,
Wow.
and one was a boy. They said 100% boy, and they were 85% sure um, my other child was a girl.
Wow.
And but I was high risk at that time because having twins, you're just high risk, and then
Right.
also having a miscarriage, I was just high risk as well. So um,
How old were you at this time?
this time I was 19.
Wow.
Yes. So we did decide to get married before the twins were born. So we got married in July of 2000. No, 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 1997.
Mhm.
And my twins were born in January of 98. And it was
Wow.
one boy and one girl.
Wow.
And I know, and everybody still is like, why did you have more? You had like your family and then you should have been done. But I wanted lots of kids. He did
Yeah.
not. I wanted a lot. Um, but we had a difficult relationship before we got married. We had an even more difficult marriage.
Yeah.
Um, he had a bad childhood, and he brought a
Oh.
lot of that into our relationship.
Okay.
Um, and I didn't know any different. I mean, like I knew because I'm not dumb, but I just made excuses for when he would speak to me certain ways, or when he'd
Okay.
throw something and break it, or and it just
Right.
progressively got worse. But I already had kids with him, and we were married,
Right.
and I just thought, this is it. This is my life. And I just dealt with it.
Right.
A
Even at
lot of it
that,
was
even at that early of an age, really.
exactly, and he was
Yeah.
my first love. He was my everything. I lost my virginity to him. He was my
Right.
first kiss, like
Right.
everything. And
And so that does kind of, taint your perspective, I would
it
guess. You know what I
does.
mean? All that stuff. I totally get it. I can relate to that. I'm sure other people can too.
Yeah, and I guess I had nothing to compare it to. I mean, my parents, they were married over 50 years. They had their problems, but I never saw them argue.
Uh-huh.
So that should have been a red flag right then and there. Like
Yeah.
my parents didn't argue like this, and my dad never mistreated my mom, at least not in front of the kids.
Well, I
Um,
want to talk about that because I actually need to look this up because you're not the only person who said my parents didn't argue. And I wonder, is that really a good thing? You know what I mean? Like if we never saw our parents fight, I feel like did we ever learn how to properly
have
talk to our
conflict resolution.
yes, that conflict.
Yes.
There's nothing like I'm not talking about abuse, right? I'm talking about like you said, conflict resolution. How do you talk to your spouse and
Hmm.
say this is my opinion or this is yours, whatever. And and I think that old school thinking of, well, don't fight in front of the kids, but then they lack that thing, that
Hmm.
conflict resolution. And then of course I gave you that opinion or that distorted view of, well, they didn't fight like this.
Right.
Because I totally get that. Because the things I saw, I allowed in my marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? My dad, like my mom would always yell at my dad.
Yeah.
Um, but my dad was quiet. My
Okay.
dad just dealt with it. I think he
Didn't
kind of just tuned
engage.
her out,
Yeah.
or I'm not sure, but I think that's who I became in the marriage. I just dealt with it. I
Okay.
just was quiet about it, and
Yeah.
that's who he was. He was like my mom. My mom wasn't angry. Um, it was just more constant complaining, and
Okay.
so I think as a man, he tuned her out.
Right.
But my husband, his was anger. His
Okay.
was threats sometimes.
Okay.
His was throwing things.
Yeah.
Um, Lots of negativity. I can honestly say I think that was the biggest thing was he always had something negative to say.
Yeah.
Nothing ever went right. And he just complained about life and the people around him and
Yeah.
me and the kids. And I was just like, you just need to say something positive. We just need to
Right.
be around people that could encourage us and lift us
Right.
up. And I
Right.
just never had that.
Yeah.
I was always the one trying to hold him up because he had a lot of hurt from his childhood.
Right.
Um,
And had he ever really dealt with that?
he didn't until way later in life, like in
Okay.
his 40s.
Okay.
Maybe even in his 30s, he started coming to terms with it, but not until maybe the last couple of years um, before he passed away did he really forgive and accept like his life and the circumstances and understood why God did what he did and why God allowed what he allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's like a whole nother story, like
Right. Exactly.
a huge story. But
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
But it's
I don't
hard
know.
when you're not, like you said, when you're not dealing with it, even you saying, I'm sure going like, we need to be positive and be around positive people. And it's like, that's all well and good. If you're not dealing with that deep, stuff that's in there. So
Mhm.
I could see if he had turmoil in his life.
He did, and we went to church throughout our marriage. I mean, we were always going to church, and even now it's like I can go to church and I can see the look on some of the women's faces that
Yeah.
they're not happy. And
Yeah.
I can tell because I was one of those women that went to church with a smile, acted like everything was fine.
Yep.
My four kids were great. We didn't have any problems,
Right. Of course.
and nobody would ever have known. And
Yeah.
I see it in women's faces now. I
Yeah.
can see like the weight. I can see that they're unhappy. Um, I don't know. I don't know if it's like discernment that God gave me,
Right.
or I could just, I honestly don't know, but
Well,
I
you've
know.
been there, so
Hmm.
you can see it. And did you
Yeah.
feel like you could talk to anybody?
No,
Okay.
no. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't find out till years later that my family suspected that there was abuse in the relationship, and
Okay.
there was. And when I did this class recently for healing, abuse was like a very broad definition.
Okay.
And so when I learned about it, I was like, that's abuse.
Yeah.
And as seeing the list of things, I learned just what abuse was.
Okay.
And it was eye opening. But I think when people think, oh, I was abused, they automatically think they're getting punched in the face and they got
Right.
black eyes and,
Right.
and it wasn't like that. There was physical abuse at times, but it wasn't every day. It wasn't every month. There were seasons and there was times where he was more angry
Yeah.
and he would get violent. But it wasn't like I lived in a home where I was hit every day. That's
Right.
not how I lived. I
Right.
lived in a home that was very negative,
Right.
very challenging to try to keep my husband happy and
Yeah, the walking on eggshells kind of
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Always
Yeah.
walking on eggshells and just trying to make sure we just get through the day without him yelling at me or yelling at the kids or
Yeah.
and then there would be weeks where it was like harmonious, and he was quote unquote changing and everything seemed good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just like boom, what's going on?
And that's the hard
And
part with emotional abuse, it's that there are no visible scars,
mhm,
and that you just it's still volatile in the fact that you really don't know what's going to happen next because you're walking on eggshells,
yeah.
and it's such an incremental thing, having lived through 33 years of it, that people are like, you didn't see that, or why didn't you leave, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But it's like, it's so incremental. You live off those times when everything's going good. You're like, oh,
Exactly.
everything's good. Oh, it's not good again. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it's not enough, like in and of itself, like the one thing, my husband was very negative. That doesn't sound like abuse, but
Hmm.
it is abuse when,
Exactly.
when
Yes.
it's constant and continues and it's always towards you. And there's just a lot to it. That's why we're
Mhm.
talking about it and why there's links on all the podcasts and everywhere. There's links everywhere, people, because it's information to know what's right and what's wrong
Mhm.
in a relationship. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And even like I can look for it in the book. I think I have a little tag on it, but it was like this wheel. Well, it's like 10 chapters, and each chapter
okay.
was crazy, but there's this wheel of abuse, and it listed all the different forms of abuse, and it
Okay.
wanted me to shade everything that I considered abuse in my marriage.
Wow.
And I was just like, this is abuse, and I'm shading it. And then I'll read like the title, and then I would read the description, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, that's me too, shading it. I
Wow.
like shaded so much,
Yeah.
but when you're living in it,
Yeah.
you don't look at it as abuse. You just look at it as an unhappy marriage, or I made him mad again, or it's because, you know, I lost my job, or like you make
Right.
excuses for what's happening and you kind of just go day by day without thinking that you're in an abusive relationship.
Right.
And then since nobody knew, maybe they suspected it, but since I didn't tell anybody,
Yeah.
I didn't have people talking to me saying, he's abusing you, or
Yeah.
you shouldn't be treated this way. Because when we were around people, he didn't treat me that way,
I was
you
just
know?
about to ask you. And
Yeah,
and I know you and I know each other from church from a long time ago, but I don't remember you having these kind of discussions with me,
right.
whenever we did women's Bible study and stuff. And not that you would have had to necessarily share with me, but I think that that is a common thing that maybe women don't feel safe
Mhm.
to talk. And that's why I'm, thankful that you are talking about it, because I do want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So so in the book, that we'll actually have a link for the book, right? Is that the book that you gave me the link?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mending the soul. Yeah.
Okay. So is that something you started recently doing, or is this something you were doing in your marriage?
Yeah, I was actually, I did it maybe 5 or 6 months ago. I started it, but it's like a 10-week process.
Awesome.
And it's a group of women that do it together.
Hmm.
Um, but I was referred to this class and like a healing class
Yeah.
by the women's director at my church.
Okay.
She knew my story. She knew I was traumatized, and she says, "I think this class would really help you."
Great.
And I just thought about it, and like still, even then, even though I knew what happened in my life,
Yeah.
I'm still in denial. I'm like, I don't need this class. Like, but I felt like I needed to do this. And so I reached out, and they called me back, and I had to fill out this whole thing and give them like a testimony and all kinds of stuff. And I was chosen
Yeah.
because it's a very small class. It's a very
Okay.
intimate setting,
Okay.
and it's a very private setting.
Yes.
And so it's not really publicized, like nobody knows, but the women meet together,
Oh, okay.
and we do this together. And I joined, and it was the hardest weeks of my life, I think, in the healing process, because my husband had already passed away.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with the grief plus everything that I encountered in my marriage. Um, and sometimes I just had to walk away from the book. I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, I'm
Right.
sitting there crying, and there's tears all over the book, and
Yeah.
it's like messing up the paper, and it's just like, what? Like, it's pulling everything that I had suppressed, stuff that I didn't even remember really.
Yeah.
And I had to think about it all over again. And all those feelings came up. And it's like I had to deal with it all over again. And then I would leave for hours, and I'd come back. I'm like, okay, I got to finish this. I have class tomorrow, whatever. And I couldn't. It was hard. And sometimes I was in the room with the ladies finishing it because I,
Yeah.
it's
You didn't want to
hard.
deal with it. And
Exactly.
I understand it's hard because I've done lots of healing and lots of counseling and everything, and it's like it really stinks sometimes to have to look at that stuff.
Hmm.
But I want to encourage people that it's hard for a moment, and then there's healing that's going to come from that,
Yeah.
because it'll stay hard forever if you never look at it.
Yeah. And even when I'm writing it, I'm like, I'm thinking like future. I'm thinking, if I write this, my kids, one day when I pass away, they're going to see my deepest thoughts,
Yeah.
And so I'm like, should I write this? No, I can't write it. No, I'm writing it. Nope, I can't. Like, so I did. So now when I look at it, I'm like I was just looking at the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like honest. Like, these are my deepest, darkest thoughts
It's
of
great.
what I went through. And now my kids, when they're going through all mom stuff, when I pass away, they're gonna be like looking at all this stuff like, mom said what? But
That's funny
it was
because I have a
necessary.
bin because I have a bin of workbooks from all the Bible studies I did,
Uh,
and I have a few friends who I've said, "Hey, if I die, I need somebody to go get that bin and go trash it,"
yeah,
because I doubt people are going to go through it. I think the same thing when I'm writing in a journal. I'm like, no one's gonna read this. You
yeah,
know what I mean? They
yeah,
may or may not, but don't let it stop you. I'm glad it's not
yeah. Oh no,
letting it
there's some
stop you.
stuff in there. But
Well,
I
they'll
mean,
have
I've been honest with my kids. They know.
yes,
But
exactly.
I think maybe there's some things in there that I wrote that are just my thoughts and what I was feeling at the
Right.
moment that maybe they don't know.
Right.
But either way, it's written. It's in pencil too. So maybe I'll
It's
just erase it, but
no,
no, I won't.
it's there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to get it all out. I've done a class like that. I did a weekend workshop like that, and it was very private. If you left the class, you could not come back because it was very private. We were sharing some really deep, dark things, and it was for that to get it out. And actually, some of the things we actually wrote on a paper, and then we went and burned it. It just felt good to do something ceremonial to
Yeah.
get rid of the past, things that where we don't want to go back to. So that was It's good to get it out. That's the thing is I know people don't want to take their stuff out and look at it. And I'm not talking about a journal or whatever. I'm talking about the stuff, your trauma that's inside of you. But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't take it out and look at it, it's just going to keep haunting you. It's going to
Yeah,
come out. It's going to come out in other ways. It's going to come out in anger and lots of things, you know.
right.
And so anyway, I'm proud of you for doing that.
Yeah.
So okay, so are you still in process of doing that or are
No, the
you
class is over.
okay?
I finished it a couple months ago. It was hard. It was hard, but it needed to be done. I
Right.
knew I probably should have done it when my husband was still alive.
Right.
Um,
Well, we shoulda, coulda, woulda, you know.
yeah,
But you know, I hope that'll encourage somebody to do these kinds of things
yeah.
now rather sooner than later. So I know that in your bio you were talking about that you made some bad decisions,
Hmm.
um, you know, with your insecurities and stuff. And so let me ask you, were these insecurities just from the, you know, really the abuse you were having in your marriage? Did you have others like from growing up or, you know, where is that coming from, do you think?
I didn't have any insecurities growing up.
Okay.
I was one of six kids. Um, I was never abused.
Yeah.
I was never spoken down to. I mean, my parents treated me well. Um, my insecurities came from my marriage because
Yeah.
my husband was insecure,
Hmm.
very overpowering, always wanted to be in control. And in
Yeah.
order to be in control, he would say things to me that would make me feel less than.
Yeah.
And I began to believe it, you know. After having kids, my body changed. I gained weight, stretch marks, whatever, you know, things
The
sag,
normal
you know.
thing. Yeah, the normal
Yeah,
things.
exactly. And I just didn't get complimented. And I just didn't feel sexy or, I mean, I know he loved me, but he didn't show it in his actions. Um, and then when we would argue, it was all you do is nag. You're just fat. Or like he would say things that it's just like, and yes, it was during an argument,
Right.
but in my mind, it was like, it was the truth. He said what he needed to say when he was mad, because when
Right.
he was happy with me, of course he wouldn't say anything bad about me because we're happy.
Right.
So I felt like the truth always came out when he was mad.
Yeah.
And I just began to believe those things about me. And I never felt good enough. I was embarrassed to change in front of him. Um, it just really messed with my head. And it progressively got worse to where the intimacy was just to take care of him, you know?
Right.
Um, I didn't care to be like that with him. Um,
Right.
and it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good.
And
Feeling that way is what I mean.
and so
He
then
never sexually abused me. I will say that. Out of all
right.
the abuse, it was never sexual. Um, and I'm thankful for that. I don't have to deal with that aspect.
Yeah.
But it came a time where I was so fed up and done that I lost love for him. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be with him anymore.
Hmm.
And I would tell him, we need counseling, or we need to go to church, or why do you treat me this way? And I would tell him these things, but it was still always my fault, or I
Yeah.
deserved it, or I was crazy, or whatever the topic was. And
Right.
it just pushed me more and more away until I just numbed myself to everything and I
Yeah.
just didn't care anymore.
Right.
And one day I said, I don't love you. I don't want to be with you anymore.
Hmm.
Like, I have no feelings for you. I don't want you to die, but I don't want to be with you. And this was in, well, we married in 1997, and in 2019, no, 2018,
Uh-huh.
I was like, I'm done. Like, that's a long
Yeah.
time, over 20 years. And I just couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
and my kids were older, not all adults yet, but teenagers. I had just lost my mom to cancer. I was taking care of my dad. My husband had his spinal injury already, so I was his caregiver. And it was just so much going on and me taking care of it and nobody there for me that I was either going to have a nervous breakdown or
Yeah.
everybody had to leave. And I chose to be alone. And I was like, I don't want to be with you anymore. So he moved out. He took the kids with him,
Uh-huh.
and I stayed with my dad and I took care of my dad. It was just that was my focus. I would still help him from time to time. I would
Right.
be there for the kids, um, but I just lived with my dad, and I got lonely and I missed companionship, even though it was toxic with him.
Right.
There was still some sort of companionship. I still had him.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
That's the hard part for sure.
yeah,
Your brain doesn't really understand that part.
yeah,
I think, or our
exactly.
heart or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but I knew I didn't want him because I knew what my life would be like if we got
Right.
back together. It
Oh
was
yeah.
never going to change. Yeah,
Look, I get it.
yeah,
33 years over here, I'm like, I don't like him. But my
yeah,
brain was like, but don't you miss him? I'm like, oh my gosh, stop it.
yeah. And I do. I would think about the good times with him and try to psych
Yes.
myself out, but then reality would be like, he's never going to change.
Hmm.
He would say he would change, but he never did.
He hasn't yet.
Yeah, exactly. And he would for a couple days or maybe even a week, but then that was it,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And with the age of technology and everybody meeting online, that's what I did. I met somebody online.
Yeah.
Um, I knew it was wrong because I was still married. And my rationalization was I'm going to be divorced from my husband. Like, when you're in that
Yep.
state of mind, you just rationalize everything, you make excuses for everything.
Well,
Um,
not to mention, it was really a time of self-preservation for
yeah,
you, really trying to you're like, I'm dying, like you just said, you know what I mean? Like you're having a nervous breakdown, you're dying, it's like it's self-preservation. Like I
yeah,
need some happiness somewhere. What does that look
yeah,
like? Even if it's in
exactly.
the wrong place.
Yeah. Oh, it was the wrong place for sure. And I did. I met somebody, and we started dating. And I never told my husband.
Mhm.
As far as he knew, I was still with my dad, taking care of my dad, working. And I had this ongoing relationship with this man. Um, but then there came a time where my dad, he was in and out of the hospital, and I knew he needed to be in a nursing home because it was beyond what I can do to help him.
Yeah.
And I was my dad's POA and MPOA. Um, so I made the decision to put him in a nursing home or a group home,
Mhm.
and I had to sell his house. And knowing I was going to sell his house, I had no place to go.
Oh.
I was either going to have to come out and tell my husband I met somebody, I'm moving in with this guy, which I didn't want to do,
Mhm.
or I had to come to terms with what the heck am I doing? I need to figure out my marriage,
Right.
and I need to go back home.
Right.
And that's what I decided, only because during the time where I was with this other man,
Yeah.
I can see change in my husband, like true change.
Oh, okay.
But I still talk myself out of it because it's like, well, I don't live there. Of course we get along great.
Oh,
Of course
right.
when I come over for the kids or to come over to help them, we're cordial and we're okay because
Yes.
we're not down each other's throat every day.
Right.
I just had to make the excuse like he's still the same way, and that was it. But deep down, being a Christian woman, I knew what I was doing was wrong. I
Mhm.
should have never pursued another relationship while I was still married, whether we're
Mhm.
separated or not.
Right.
You're just not supposed to do that. So I decided I broke up with this man. I told him, I can't be with you. I got to move back home. I
Mhm.
need to give my marriage another try. Because during this whole time, my husband was doing everything to get me back. He would
Okay.
text me, he would send me prayers, he would send me marriage videos. He would say, let's go to counseling, like
Okay.
constant. And I would see the change, but it was just like, no, it's fake. It's fake. It's fake. I didn't want to believe it.
Well, it's hard because sometimes it can be fake. And
Mhm.
now, had you guys gone to counseling in the past? Had he done these things in the
Yes.
past? All these kinds of things?
Yeah, we went to marriage counseling several times and we learned so many tools and techniques and, things to do to be better communicators with each other and give each
Right.
other, like, understanding how we deal with conflict. He is doesn't think about it. He processes it quickly and says what he needs to say. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm like, whoa, I need to think about this.
Okay.
I don't say anything that I'm going to regret. And he's just the opposite. So we were very different and we learned why we were that way. But in the heat of the moment, putting all those tools to
Yeah,
work is very
exactly.
hard. When
Yeah.
emotions are flying and words are being said, and
Right.
like it just doesn't happen the way you learn it in class. But
Well, no, and I think because if you don't do the deep work as well, I think that's why a lot of times they tell you go to marriage counseling, but then each of
mhm,
you go to counseling and deal with the deep stuff that's in there because that's a lot of times where anger is coming from. And but I
yeah,
mean, I don't know what was going on with you guys. And so because it feels almost like a little love bomb, with him sending you videos and this and that. Because did he say he was trying to make changes? Did he?
yeah, he did.
Okay.
He was praying. He was going to church with our kids. Like he was doing it without me. And before it was like me trying to wake him up for church in the morning or
Okay.
trying to coerce him to go again at night and or to be involved or let's sign up for a class, or it was
Yeah.
me constantly doing it. And now he was doing it without me there.
Oh,
Like I
okay.
can see the dedication.
Okay.
But again, my mind was, is he just doing this to get me back?
Well,
How
right.
long is this going to last? It's
Of
only
course. I mean,
lasting until,
well, of course, and you had that history, of course, that this
yeah,
has happened before. So,
right.
where he did a little something and then it stopped. So I could see where you were hesitant,
Hmm.
but you
For sure.
decided to go back, despite. I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure, but I want to ask you. With the other man, you don't have to go into all that, but you were looking for something. You were looking for somebody to talk nicely to you and those kinds of things. And then, so were you getting that there from the other
Yes.
relationship?
And this is how I knew that. I mean, like, I know the devil is real. I know that. I know we live in a very evil world, but I know just how deceiving the devil can be, because the man I met was exactly the man I wanted my husband to be.
Oh, okay.
I saw no red flags. He was calm. He was happy. He was positive. He
Okay.
cooked for me. He would text me in the morning. He would text me before he went to bed. Like, he would do all the things that I never got.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this real?
Right.
Like, I never felt so much love. And I fell in love with him very quickly
Yeah.
because I don't want to say I never felt it, because I know my husband loved me, but it didn't it wasn't tainted. It was
Yeah.
it, I don't know, it was just like, he loves me, he calls
Yeah.
me beautiful, and I think I'm the ugliest person in the world. And um
Right.
so it was easy to fall into that. But the whole span of the time we were together, the man treated me very well.
Yeah.
I never felt threatened. I never felt unloved or ugly or any of
Right.
those things.
But you're still
um
feeling like this is not right. What
right.
with what you believe, you were like this isn't right regardless of, what I'm doing over here.
Yeah.
Um because you wanted I mean, you would with abuse, you don't necessarily have to give it another shot, but you wanted to. That's what you
Right.
decided to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
And I did. I told the guy, and because I have the Christian background
yeah.
and I knew what I was doing was wrong, it was eating me up inside.
Yeah.
And that's the Holy Spirit, but and I know my husband was praying the whole time, and
Right.
I know my kids were,
Yeah.
and maybe even others, people I don't know that were praying for our marriage. I don't know.
Right.
But either way, I knew I was selling my dad's house. I knew I wasn't doing right, and I needed to work on my marriage, even though I was trying to convince myself that my husband was just acting this way for the time being.
Okay.
I was like, you know what? I'm just going to humor myself. I'm going to go back and I'm going to see what this is all about.
So you were
And
willing to give it a chance for a time being, just for a time to see if it would change at all, or
I did. When I went back, I wanted to see what if it was going to
okay.
stay,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And if it didn't, I was going to have to move out or figure another plan out.
Right, exactly.
So I let this man know, and I told him I have to work on my marriage. I
Mhm.
have to do this. And it sucked because I had
Yeah.
fallen in love with him.
Right.
And for about a month and a half, I actively worked on my marriage. We did devotionals at night. We'd pray together. We would read together. We would go to church together. We went to counseling. Like we did all the things.
Yeah.
Um, I knew deep down that I was eventually going to have to tell him that I had met somebody and that I had given myself, my body to somebody else.
So you
Because
hadn't he didn't know any of that.
no, and
Oh,
at
okay.
this point, he thought I was still have only been with him,
Right.
and I was just with my dad taking care of him, that I never
Right.
pursued any relationships. And he would ask, and I would be like, no. Of course, I would lie. I wouldn't tell him.
Right.
Um, but I did give myself to this man. This is the
Yeah.
second man I gave my body to.
Right.
And, but so I knew that was also eating me up inside, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to tell him one day, but I'm not going to do it now because we're getting strong again. We're working on this. He seems to be changing for real.
Yeah.
It's been weeks now or months, and he's doing good,
Yeah.
and the way he talks to me and how he's leading the home the way I've always wanted him to lead.
Wow.
And I was just like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
Um, and it was hard because I was living a lie still, even though I wasn't
Yeah,
with that
exactly.
man. There was
Right.
still a lie I was living.
Yeah, you
Like
hadn't
I,
told
like
you
I was
hadn't
the good wife, even though we were separated. And
right, you hadn't told him and
right,
he didn't know. Yeah, and you felt like you wanted to tell him.
I
Yeah.
did, but I didn't know when. I knew there would be a time. I always thought about it. I just didn't know when.
Right.
And then a couple months later, I began talking to this man again. And like all the feelings came back. And he's like, just come over. I want to see you. I'll make you dinner. We're
Mhm.
not going to do anything. I want to talk. Said all the things that he needed to say.
Right.
Um, and I found myself back over there. He made me dinner. And with all the feelings that I had, the relationship resumed. But
Wow.
now this time it was, I'm living at home
Yes.
with my husband, working on my marriage, going to marriage counseling,
Yes.
going to church,
Yes.
taking my kids to church, and I'm having this secret life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
I,
I'm
I,
sitting
I love the way you I love the way you were like you caught your head. Sorry, I'm talking over you and it's cutting out your audio, but on YouTube you guys will laugh because she was just like she couldn't even believe she did it herself.
I couldn't. And I would sit there, I would sign up for classes, women's classes, and I'm learning about God and reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it, I'm texting this guy,
Yeah.
and it's like, how many women now, when I go to church, when I'm sitting at a table with these women, how
Yeah.
many are doing the same thing I'm doing? Or
Right.
that I did, I should say, because I'm not doing it now, but
Right.
I wasn't the only one. I know I'm not the only one.
Right.
Um, but I know this for a fact. The Lord has given me that discernment.
Yeah.
I know when a woman is
Yeah.
not faithful in marriage. I can see it.
Yeah.
When I look, it's just revealed to me. And I don't know why God gave me that discernment. I don't
Right.
know if in the future I'm supposed to go up to her and talk to her. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know when women are, oh, and this is going to scare a bunch of people that see this because um,
You're not gonna have any more friends after
that's
this.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, people do have said that in church before too, where they're, and so discernment is just for people who don't know, it's just information that you might get a feeling or some information from God. And it's not for us to go and be like, you're a sinner. It's nothing like that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's for us to be available to like you're doing, to be available for these women in
Hmm.
case they need someone to talk to because you didn't have anyone.
Yeah.
And so you would be a safe place. And so it's going to take, right? One person is probably going to come up to you
Hmm.
and you're going to be able to go, "Hey, is everything okay?" or whatever it is. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, and be able to talk, and she's going to see that you are a safe place to talk.
And it actually has already happened. There's,
Oh, great.
yeah, I know. And this is the scary part because I'm like, God, why me? Because he
Why
tells me,
not you?
he'll tell
Okay?
me, you need to message so and so,
Yes. Yes.
and I'm like, why? I need you to tell him something. And I'm texting or I'm sending it through like Messenger or whatever,
Yeah.
email. And I'm like, this sounds weird. I don't know why I'm typing it. And I'm just like praying about it. Like, are you sure, God? And whatever, he's telling me things,
Yeah.
and I'll send it.
Yeah.
And I've had people call back like, oh my gosh, like you have no idea
Yeah.
that what this means. And it's like, I don't know what it means. It makes no sense to me. I
Right.
kind of make sense of what it means, but it was for them. A lot of it has to do with their marriage.
Wow.
And my calling was to work with married women
Uh-huh.
and lead women. That's what was revealed to me. It's to lead women, and then on top of it, married women.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess I'll get to that later because my husband passed away and now I'm a widow. But um, I just knew what I did. I was supposed to talk to women, and
Yeah.
hopefully they can learn the signs that would lead, like, to where I was at, like,
Right.
and not make the excuses and not go down that road, not cause problems in their marriage and disruption in their lives as their kids and their household or
Right.
anything like that. And
So talk about how you ended up ending that relationship, and then even more like how did you end up telling him,
mhm.
and then if you want to go into him
Well,
passing.
yeah, I had resumed that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and I was an Uber driver. So I didn't have to be at my job. So I had the flexibility to go visit him,
Right.
and make my own hours
Mm-hmm.
and come home when I could. And if I did want to Uber for a couple hours, I would Uber to make some money, and then I would go over to his house. And my husband never
Yeah.
knew, so I was
Right.
able to hide it well.
Yeah.
And I did that for about 5 or 6 months. But because I was still involved in church, because I was working on my marriage,
Right.
going to counseling, the conviction in my life was like out of this world. Like I couldn't handle it anymore. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to live right, but I kept sinning. Like,
Right. Right.
and I wasn't making excuses at that time. It was, I don't even know. It was just evil decisions. I don't know. I can't describe my mindset
Right.
except for I loved the guy, but I had also fallen back in love with my husband. And
Right.
when people say you can't be in love with two people at the same time, you can, because I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand, but you only know it when you're in it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was falling in love with my husband, who he was becoming, the leader in the house that I've always wanted him to be. He was
Right.
changing the way God wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And I also love this man that never stopped treating me good. He was
Yeah.
still good to me.
Yeah.
And now both of them were. Um, and I just knew I couldn't do it any longer. So the day before Thanksgiving, and that was November of 2019. Actually, I started the relationship with that guy in 2018.
Okay.
So 20 months later, 21 months later, of this ongoing relationship and stuff, I was so overcome with guilt that I told my husband.
No.
And he was sitting on the bed, and I was sitting next to him. And he can read my body language. He's like, "What's the matter? There's something the matter."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Do you have something to tell me?" And I just nodded. I never said a word. There were yeses and nos. You know, he
Right.
asked the questions, and I was like, "Yes, no," you know. And he's like, "Do you have something to tell me?" And I said, "Yeah." I nodded. He goes, "You met somebody, huh?" And I nodded.
Gosh. Did he
And
just have a feeling?
he had a feeling, and he
No.
had been having a feeling, but I kept
Okay.
denying it.
Oh,
No, I
okay.
never met anybody. Stop asking, whatever, because I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to tell him.
Right.
And after he said, "You met somebody," I just nodded, and he goes, "Did you have sex with him?" And I nodded yes.
Mm.
And he just started crying, and I was already crying.
Yeah.
And he said, "Susan, I forgive you.
Wow.
I love you. We're going to work past this." And I was just like,
Wow.
I couldn't process it.
Right.
Like, this is not the man I've always known. Like,
Yeah.
I would have been in fear that he was going to throw something at me or shove me or who knows what, you know?
Right.
And the first thing out of his mouth was, "I forgive you." Like, instant. And I was just like, what? But when he said that, it sounds weird, but I felt worse. I felt even more unworthy even to be his wife
Yeah.
because he was so forgiving.
Right.
And it was just like, oh my God, I really don't deserve this,
Yeah.
you know? And we talked a little bit more, maybe 10, 15 more minutes. He was asking questions. And at that time, I was talking, I was answering them. And this was the day before Thanksgiving. So every Thanksgiving, like, I make this dinner, and we had moved back to Arizona at the time. So everybody was coming to my house. So I was going to be hostess the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, oh my God, it was like the worst day ever. But I was like, I have to leave. I just needed time away. And I left. I needed time to think. I went over to that man's house. I told him, I was like, I told my husband, he knows about you. He doesn't know all the details, but I told him. And
Wow.
he was like, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. He wants to be with me. He wants to work this out.
Yeah.
He doesn't want me to be with you." And so he was kind of like, he didn't really know what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he told me he wanted to be with me.
Right.
So both men wanted to be with me, and I felt like both of them were going to fight for me.
Yeah.
But deep down in my heart, I knew I had to do what was right in God's eyes. And
Okay.
that was ask for forgiveness and work on my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I went home with the intention of that's what I was going to do. Um, but that night, that whole next day, it was Thanksgiving, and we had to play it off like we were arguing, but everybody felt the tension.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we didn't really say anything. We were cordial with each other. We had to talk when we needed to talk.
Yeah.
But then once everybody left, it was just this exhausting day of holding everything in. And we talked again that night. And he just begged me, my husband just begged me to stay and to
Oh.
work it out. And we'll continue going to our counselor. And
Yeah. And
I
there
was just
wasn't
very
any
open.
and there wasn't any abuse happening and all those
No,
things. Yeah.
no.
Right.
And I felt at that time that there wouldn't be. Like,
Yeah.
it was done. It was over. That wasn't him anymore.
Right.
And but I was so overcome with shame and guilt
Yeah.
that night I'm laying in bed and he's sleeping, and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't be in a marriage and feel this way
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't think there's any other way to feel. except for shame and guilt for what I did.
Yeah.
And the feeling of being unworthy, even though he used to be this man that I stopped loving for a time,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't that man now,
Right.
but I felt unworthy of being with the man that he was now.
Yeah.
And I got up early in the morning. It's like 3:30, 4 in the morning. I quietly packed some things and I left and I went to
Wow.
go be with the other guy.
Wow.
Yes. And I texted him. I said, I'm leaving my husband. I can't, I, there's no coming back from what I did. Even though I knew what my husband said, I felt there's no way my marriage will ever be
Wow.
good again. Like I screwed it up
Yeah.
telling him, even though he's saying he forgave me and all these things, I thought, no way. Once this calms down and those feelings of forgiveness go away, it
Yeah.
was, I didn't know what to expect.
And you didn't want
So
to, and you didn't want to stick around to see. You
I
just were,
didn't
it was
exactly,
that shame and guilt that just drove you away.
exactly. And
Wow.
I was with that man for 3 days. Um, and then one morning, it was December 2nd. I remember the day, the exact day, December 2nd of 2019. Um, I was sitting on his couch and the Holy Spirit said, "Get out of that house right now."
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't even second guess it. I
Yeah.
grabbed the belongings that I brought. I had went to Walmart and picked up a few more things that I needed. So I grabbed those things. I didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
So just a couple bags worth of stuff. And at this time, my husband had called me and he was talking to me about a sermon or something that he read. I don't remember a dream he had. I don't remember what he was saying, but
Right.
I was on the phone with him. He had no idea I was driving back.
Wow.
And it was about a half hour from my house to the other man's house. And I'm driving back and he's just talking and I'm listening. And then I get out of my car and I walk up to the door and I push the doorbell and he's like, "Hold on, somebody's here." And he opens the door and it's me standing there. And he's like, "Are you coming home?"
Oh
And I
my
said,
gosh.
"Yes." And he just hugged me. It was like a Lifetime movie, like you can hear like
Right.
music,
Right.
and I knew I made the right decision. I just
Yeah.
knew. And
Well, shame will really isolate you. You know,
oh yes,
that's the biggest thing, and it's understandable why you ran. Even if you had no one to run to, um, running, it makes sense. And
yeah.
and did he ever hold your husband? Did he ever hold anything against you? You know, did he when he said he forgave you? Did he ever hold it against you?
I wouldn't say he held anything against me, but he was still very forgiving. It was a daily thing with him to
Yeah,
forgive me
of
because
course.
once that overwhelming forgiveness, I want to be with her
Yeah,
feeling ran out,
yeah,
the reality set in of what I did.
yeah,
And we had rough days,
yeah.
rough days where he was like, "I don't even know if I can do this."
Right.
And we
Well, it's a
would,
process for sure. That's what
oh,
people don't
yeah.
understand. Forgiveness is some people it's one time thing, other people it's a a daily thing like you
Oh, yeah.
said, and it's a process. So don't think that you have to forgive and then be done. It can be a process of,
Oh,
okay,
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
forgiving again.
Exactly. And it's biblical. Like if we want to be forgiven, we need to forgive.
Right.
And so it was an ongoing battle with him for the first couple months. He wanted to be with me, but it was a struggle um, of the things that he knew I did. And the man that I was with would call him, would send emails,
Wow.
would text,
Oh jeez.
would really intrude in our marriage. And it was just making it very difficult.
Oh yeah.
And he just wouldn't stop. And it got very out of hand. And that's more of my testimony that I'm not ready to share right
That's
now.
fine. Yep.
At some point, it
Yep.
will be shared more with the world.
Yeah.
The details of that relationship.
Yeah.
But that made it hard. But because my husband still pressed on and still forgave me despite the constant problems that that guy brought on,
Yeah.
it just showed me how much my husband really loved me and wanted to be with me. And we continued counseling, we continued reading,
Mm-hmm.
we prayed together, we read together, and for the next couple of years, the Lord restored our marriage. Like
Yeah.
my husband became the man that I had always wanted him to be,
Mm-hmm.
the leader in the house that he should have always been. I felt loved. I felt cherished. I
Mm-hmm.
was respected. I felt beautiful. Um, all the things I never had.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it
glad you
was,
got to have them.
I got to have it.
I'm
I
glad you
got to
did.
have it.
Yeah.
And I never thought it was possible. And I know it was because of God. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only way. Because when we finally did jump in without just putting our toes in
Yeah.
to counseling or whatever, we had to be completely vulnerable with God, and
Right.
make him the center instead of what we wanted. And
Yeah.
when we truly made God the center of our marriage and gave him the allowance to do what he needed to do, our marriage was restored
Oh, wow.
fully, like even beyond what I had thought.
Yeah.
And it it makes no sense, but it does at the same time. Um, I'm just thankful I got to have that
Yeah.
before he passed away. Um, it bothers me sometimes. I'm just like, God, like,
Right.
why?
Right.
I finally get this
Right.
man
And
that
now
I've
he's
always
gone.
wanted, and
Yeah.
now he's gone,
Yeah.
you know? But
But you got to have it, and I
yeah,
hope that's some consolation.
yeah.
So, thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, it's
Tell
a
me
lot.
where you're at now. Are you now working with women in like with Bible study and things like that, encouraging women?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, before my husband passed away, um, I was already in the process of leading women, being trained, and that kind of thing at my church. So he got to see me in my first steps of being in women's ministry
That's
and
awesome.
leading. And then when he passed away, I continued on. I feel like being surrounded by all those women helped me
Mhm.
get through it.
Yeah.
I met some women that I'm very close to still, that were there when I needed them, and they're still there now.
That's awesome.
And I've met so many more women since then. Um, I have done several Bible studies since then. Um, I'm a registered precepts teacher or a facilitator, I guess.
Mhm.
So I've done precept classes in my home where women come to my house.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm still an Uber driver. I still make my own schedule. Um, but I can be flexible with the women coming to my house, and I don't charge them for anything. They just buy the
Right.
book.
So that's
And
awesome.
I
So
but I
you're
study every
encourage
day. I
Yeah, so you're
study,
encouraging them and
yeah. And I
studying
met
with
so
them.
many women, and I'm a mentor to one. Um, but I know that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it I still pray about it, and I still wonder why, because I knew my calling was to work in women's ministry, but
Right.
also work with married couples. My husband and I were both called to work with married couples.
Okay.
And so when he passed away, I was like, God, I don't understand. Why would you put this on my life
Mhm.
if I'm no longer married? I'm a widow now. I don't have a husband. And he still said, you're going to work with married women.
Yeah.
You still have to have a mindset of marriage. And this past year, I last year I read the whole Bible, and
Mhm.
that was something I decided I'm going to read the whole Bible, and I read it front to back, like with this app that told me what to read.
Right.
Well, this year, well, at the end of last year, God said, I want you to read it again, but I want everything to be with marriage in mind.
Mm,
And that's when I was like, God, my husband has passed away.
right.
What are you talking about? I don't understand.
Right.
And he's like, get a notebook, study the Bible. Everything that has to do with marriage, you need to write down, highlight,
Yeah.
put sticky notes, whatever you need to do. When you read the Bible again, it's all about marriage.
Yeah.
And so this whole past year, I mean, we're into what, like August now, but I've been reading it in chronological order this time, which I like.
Yeah.
It's very different. Since I read the Bible last year, I have a good foundation, but now read it in chronological order, things are just like, it's like, oh, I get it, like certain time frames of things.
Well, and it's
So
great to be able to still, I mean, you were married, you know what I mean? And so you have a lot of experience in in that 20 plus years you guys were
mhm,
together, you know what I mean? And
mhm.
so I could see where that's going to be a blessing to other people.
Yeah, yeah.
I know
I
it
still,
feels confusing.
I know, and I'm still, every morning I get up, I pray and I read, and I notate whatever I need to notate that has to do with marriage or covenant or
Yeah.
love or husband or wife or whatever, any of those key words that are associated with marriage. And it still didn't make sense until more recently. Um, I met somebody,
Mm,
and it's become very serious.
wow.
And he was prophesied on. So now my mind's like, is this going to be the man that I'm going to be with, that I'm going to do life with? And now have a better understanding of marriage, because he has his own testimony of marriage.
Okay.
And I don't know, like I can only just speculate,
Right.
but I did find love again.
Wow.
Um, I never thought it would, and I have friends and family that I would tell I'm never going to be with anybody again, and I nobody's going to be better than my husband,
Right.
because when he changed, he like was
Yeah.
off the charts, amazing. And I was just like, I'm never going to find anybody like that again.
Yeah.
He set this bar so high that nobody would ever get close.
Right.
And and I met somebody,
Ooh, that's
and
amazing.
he is like hitting the
Woo,
bar.
woo.
So it's kind of like, now I think my husband set this bar, so for me to learn, don't take anything
Anything
less.
less.
Don't
Wow.
settle for anything less. If
Wow.
you don't feel beautiful, or if you are disrespected, like, and I haven't been.
That's
And
amazing.
sometimes I'm just like, is this too good to be true? But this man,
Hmm.
I swear, is a gift from God, and I'm happy. I never thought, and I have friends that are like, I've never seen you like this. I can just
Oh,
tell. They can tell through my texts how happy I am, and it's just crazy because I was just so adamant about never being with anybody, even though they would say, you're young, you can move
right.
on, and you're a
Right.
widow and you're going to be lonely again. I was just like, nope, nobody's going to be as good as my husband. Nope. And I was just like shunning everybody. Um, but yeah, my,
I love that. I love that you can see that you can go back and see that, right? It's like now you know what the bad was like and now you know what the good is like. And then to have that look, that's we have to live and learn. You know what I mean?
mhm,
And now you know, now you're ready for the next person.
yeah,
That's really
yeah.
great.
And this book that I had for healing, yes, I think there's still a lot of healing left to do, and
Yeah.
I still have baggage,
Yeah.
but I think it was necessary for me to do that class and get the healing I needed.
Yeah.
So when I did start a new relationship, which I didn't think I would,
Right.
but now that I look back, I'm like, I'm glad I did it, because those hurts and those things that I had bottled deep down, who knows what would have happened
Right.
if I brought it into a next relationship, you know?
Right. That's why you got to deal with it,
But
because we do carry that baggage. Oh my
exactly.
gosh. This is such a great story. I know it's going to resonate with a lot of women. I know it's going to help a lot of women. We'll put a link to the book in the show notes as well. Was there anything else you wanted to tell anybody before we say goodbye today?
Um, I guess just that voice that you hear inside
Yeah.
is the Holy Spirit, you know,
Mhm.
and don't quench the Holy Spirit. Don't, I, I think it's in Timothy. I'm horrible with quotes, but I know I've read it. You don't want to quench that voice inside, and
Right.
He's there for a reason.
Right.
And just if you're in the situation and you're making excuses and you think you deserve happiness or this is what your
Mhm.
husband deserves or
Right.
whatever, it's not okay. It's not
Right.
what God wants. God
Right.
wants your marriage to be restored.
Right.
God doesn't want anyone to be divorced. And you need to do what you need to do to restore your marriage and allow God to restore it because
Yeah.
I
The
thought
thing
mine
is,
was beyond, and He did.
and it does talk about that. That's the abuse thing that we have to filter through, because he doesn't want us in abuse. So that's for sure that you saw as such a miraculous change. I'm so thankful for that, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
thankful for that he had decided to make changes, because that's what we have to do. Is we can't just stay right just
Mm-hmm.
because um just for that, just to say
Yes.
that we're married, because we want to be safe as well. But we are responsible for our behavior. That's what I'm going to say is
Exactly.
I'm responsible for mine. You were responsible for yours, and your husband's was responsible for his,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided to make that change so you guys could be restored, which is great.
Yeah. And it was, our marriage was restored and it is possible when I thought
That's
it was
right.
impossible.
That's
I,
right.
when I thought I lost love, I was like, I'm never going to love him again.
Yeah,
But I fell back in love with him. I loved him more than I had ever loved him before.
that's
And
so
it
amazing.
was a different kind of love. I felt like it was a love that came from God, you know, like the way
Right.
a wife should have
Right.
loved her husband the whole time. And God showed him how to love his wife, you know, and that's
Yeah.
another command in the Bible on love your wife as Christ loves the church. And I think
So he learned that.
he learned it
Yeah.
and I felt it. There's no denying it. And because I felt it, and then because I could be the woman that I needed to be or the wife that I needed to be, it just it just was healed. Like God just healed it and restored it because we were all in and we allowed him to
Yes.
be in our marriage
Right.
rather than just go to church and take a class and kind of work on it. It was like, God,
Right.
we need you. Like,
Right.
this ain't
Or
gonna work.
it's right. Or it's never going to get better. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the
And
thing, is that those big changes, So, well, I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people today for sure. Um, so if, on social media, there's going to be a post about Susan. If you guys could go, and if anything resonated with you today, comment on that and ask a question or two if you want, and maybe Susan will answer that for you if you
yeah,
have something issue. But
yeah,
Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so open
you're
and
welcome.
just sharing it all. And I just really appreciate you being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So
Thank
we'll
you
see
for
you.
having me.
You're welcome. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.